Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Well, good morning, everybody, and happy February. This is Rich Scheben from Montana, and I'm going to be broadcasting with Dr. Norm Shealy today. Dr. Shealy, are you with us?
I am here.
Awesome. How are you, sir?
I'm wonderful. Thank you, Rich. Sorry I missed you last Monday.
No, I heard you guys had some flash flooding down there.
Well, interestingly, I was going just past such a thing. There was a roadblock. They pushed the block aside and motioned me to come through. As I came through, somebody came out of a side road and bashed into my car. I wasn't hurt, but the car is badly damaged.
Oh, wow.
It took up the day.
I hope there was witnesses there to prove that it was not your fault.
Oh, yeah. It was clear. I was going about 5 miles an hour. They must have been going about 40 miles an hour.
Oh, man. Well, you're very lucky that you're not hurt.
I am, but it's where we are.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of stress, one of the questions I want to have you discuss today or address is all these unitive measures of despair, the depression, the anxiety, the suicide, the obesity, the drug overdose. I mean, it's on and on and on. And the blue light laziness, where people are just stuck in front of their computers and televisions and not going outside and creating adventures for themselves. It's very sad. But Dr. Shealy, before I start picking your brain, I want to make a few announcements, please. First of all, I want to thank Jason in Minnesota for engineering the broadcast. We really appreciate that. And Vince wanted me to mention a couple of things real quick, especially regarding the blizzard in the Northeast. He wants the class to make sure that they loosen their frozen windshield wipers from the windshield before starting their engine in case the wiper is on. Vince, Dr. Shealy, basically, since you mentioned cars, that's just one of his favorite things. So he wants to make sure that the damage to the wiper linkage and the motor does not occur. And he also wanted me to share with him that he will be solo talking about tips from his non-published book regarding home and automobile tips, and he's going to be doing the same thing on Thursday, being solo, talking about tips from the books and automotive tips. Vince loves anything to do with cars. And Friday, he's going to be on with Kathy and Bert, 2 different hours. So that is Vince's itinerary, so I wanted to share that with the class. And Dr. Shealy, since, we were talking about, you said that's the way things are today, and I mentioned all these unitive measures of despair. Is there, besides going the pharmacological route, because you've made it very clear many times that when you get diagnosed with an acute disease and it turns chronic, after 6 months taking a drug, a synthetic drug, it basically starts deteriorating or killing you. So what can people do, maybe with food? Maybe is there certain types of food that can give energy? And I don't mean short-term energy like immune suppressants like sugar. But what can people do naturally to fight these unitive measures of despair and gain more energy? Is there any home remedy, common sense, logical thing people can do, Dr. Shealy?
Well, the simplest dietary help for depression is a combination of tryptophan, the amino acid tryptophan, with at least a good amount, 25 milligrams to 50 milligrams of B complex, and a tiny bit of lithium orotate, 10 to 20 milligrams for an adult. That I've used to treat mild to moderate at the most depression for many years.
Okay, and what kind of results have you seen with that, Dr. Shealy?
Excellent. I gave a talk on that at the DeBakey conference back in the 70s. It was picked up by the National Enquirer, and within 24 hours, the country was sold out of tryptophan.
Oh, well, at least people are listening in some respects. That's great. Now, Dr. Shealy, regarding, from a layperson's perspective, we're seeing, like when I was a kid growing up in the 60s and 70s, you didn't hear of childhood cancer. It was so rare. Now there's immune disorders, there's neurological disorders, and I don't mean just autism and things. I mean, there's so many, there's a whole long list. If I had to ask a question regarding the ratio of cause and diagnosis relation, and this is a multifaceted question. I want you to answer it the way you see fit. But talking about childhood cancer, immune disorders, and neurological disorders, and that ratio of cause diagnosis between pollution, fluoride in the water, all contaminants in water and food, GMOs, versus vaccines. If you had to separate the two, maybe in percentages, and even compare that to 60 years ago, how would you answer that question, Dr. Shealy?
I think that the number of vaccines that children receive today is responsible for about 50% of the increased problem. But the fluoride and other toxicities are also tremendously important. You can't really separate. Poison is poison.
Right. No, fluoride, I mean, it's often been main ingredient in rat poison. Even China labels it as a pesticide.
Yep.
Brain lesions, sterility, makes people docile.
It cuts the IQ an average of 10% in fluoridated waters.
Wow. That is so scary, Dr. Shealy, not to mention all the synthetic drugs out there. What happened to, you look at the Nuremberg Code where we had to have consent to be experimented on. You look at the Geneva Convention, the Hippocratic Oath. Where has all this gone, Dr. Shealy? Does anything mean anything anymore?
Well, to be quite honest, no. For the last 9 months, I would say I do not trust any media, positive or negative. They both are unable to defend their points of view. You get exaggerations and extremes from everybody. On the other hand, there's no question in my mind that the entire fake-ademic, false-ademic, pseudodemic is the greatest nonsense in the history of the modern world.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. In fact, since you've kind of deviated in that direction, I do have some articles I want to discuss the scamdemic with you. Now, I totally agree that it is a vaccine, that there is a virus, but it's 1% virus. I'd always say it's 99% agenda to take away our freedoms, our liberties, our rights. And I'm going to mention a few articles here, Dr. Shealy. The first article is a cardiothoracic surgeon warns the FDA and Pfizer on immunological danger of COVID vaccines in recently convalescent and asymptomatic carriers. And I'm just going to read a couple of short paragraphs here. And this doctor, his last name is Noor Chasm. I'm sure I'm not pronouncing it correctly, but that's how it's hyphenetically appearing. And he talks about how he warns almost certain immunological prognostication that if viral antigens are present in the tissues of subjects who undergo vaccinations, the antigen-specific immune response triggered by the vaccine will target those tissues and cause tissue inflammation and damage. And he talks about the harm in elderly patients, especially with cardiovascular deaths regarding this COVID-19 vaccination, what's happening all across the world, Norway, Germany, UK, Gibraltar, the U.S., and he talks about how he cited research that's showing, in addition to the heart, ACE2 receptors, which are contributors, are also present in microvasculature of the brain, liver, and kidney. Now, I want you to explain what I just said and ACE2 receptors, and also explain the fact that don't vaccines mean specifically prepared antigen to be given to a person to provide immunity? Dr. Shealy.
Well, that's theoretically the purpose in the vaccine, to provide immunity to theoretically to specific, more or less, viruses. On the other hand, what they actually do is disturb the immune system and damage the immune system, and therefore sometimes cause more trouble than they can help. I believe that the incidence of autism, especially, and many other hyperactivity aspects in children, is markedly related to the increased inflammation from multiple vaccines.
You know, and related to that, have you heard of Dr. Dolores Cahill, Dr. Shealy?
I know the name, but not personally.
She's a professor at Molecular Genetics School of Medicine in Dublin. And I'm going to basically quote some of her transcript. Okay, she's talking about the mRNA vaccines. And basically what it does is this gene therapy, which she's calling it, or medical device, is setting up autoimmune disease chronically.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's a pretty big statement right there. And she also says, now that you've made yourself into a genetically modified organism, I can't read the whole transcript because it would take the whole broadcast. So I'm just reading certain things that I've read earlier. And so the immune system is meant to push the viruses or bacteria out. Now the autoimmune reaction is attacking your body low grade. And she says now, months later, when you come across the virus that stimulates the immune system to get rid of the virus, when the immune system sees that you have viral problems in your own cells and organs, then about a week later, the adaptive immune system kicks in, the mechanism that makes specific long-term memory antibodies against a pathogen, and you go into organ failure. I'm reading this from her transcript. Because
I agree. I absolutely agree.
I mean, this is. I mean, because, let me read a few more lines, Dr. Shealy. It's really eye-opening to see that so many people are taking these vaccines. Now, I got to tell you too, Australia, France, and even Merck, the big pharmaceutical company, is saying that this stuff doesn't work, and they're stopping vaccine processes. But let me finish a couple more quotes, what she said in the transcript. Because your immune system is killing your own organs, those patients will represent a sepsis initially, then later you die of organ failure. If you have one or two comorbidities, the energy immune system requires will make the older person very tired and exhausted, and they don't have the capacity to survive if you have underlying conditions. I'm going to ask for your response to that, Dr. Shealy, in some detail, if you don't mind, when we get back after the break, please. We'll be right back with Dr. Norm Shealy. We appreciate you being here, folks. Welcome back to the broadcast, everybody. This is Rich Sheaven, broadcasting out of Montana. Pardon me if I'm out of breath. I just had to run up the stairs to get to the next segment. And Dr. Shealy, since we're on this topic again, I want to mention another article. Let me read a few lines from it. An investigation into the origin of COVID-19 has uncovered a final trail of evidence that directly links Dr. Anthony Fauci and the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease to get unethical gain-of-function research on coronaviruses. Now, he basically he denied all this, and he continued to gain these gain-of-functions or continue to pursue them secretly, subcontracting it using our tax dollars, even though he's been doing it for over 10 years. And I have a picture here regarding, it has Dr. Fauci, Melinda Gates, and Barack Obama at the Wuhan lab in 2015. And the text says, you mean this Dr. Fauci who was with Obama in 2015 in the Wuhan lab where they paid the lab $3.7 million for a bat project? And it's so unbelievable, Dr. Shealy, how they gaslight the public and say they're not doing it, but yet they're using our tax dollars to do all this, to basically eliminate our rights and our freedoms and create and cover up crimes. And now it says in this article, Fauci and the criminal network is behind the whole COVID-19. Now, here we have also an article that Dr. Fauci was saying, and I'm just going to paraphrase it real quick. He's saying now you should wear 2 masks, but now he says it doesn't make a difference. It's gotten to the point where it's comical. But
Fauci is one of the most evil men in the world. He and Bill Gates and George Soros are the 3 most evil people in this country and in the world to some extent. Fauci sucks, and that's being kind.
But it's medical tyranny, Dr. Shealy. How do people get away with this?
Well, because the entire government now is filled with crooks. And in my opinion, the entire federal government is filled with crooks and castrata. The Republicans for the last 4 years are just castrated nothing.
Yeah, and it's almost surreal when I read these articles. You know, they're out there all over the place, but they think the American people is so dumb that they can't understand. Wow, that's very scary.
They have risen up to support Trump.
Yeah. You know, I have another article here. You mentioned about evil people. Here's an article that just came out. Peruvian court rules that Bill Gates, George Soros, since you mentioned him, and the Rockefeller family created the coronavirus pandemic.
I agree with that totally, and Rockefeller's been evil since the beginning of Rockefeller. He was behind the entire Flexner nonsense a century ago.
Yeah, wow, that's really a sad state. Now, I did mention before the break, Dr. Shealy, that Australia, France, and even big old Merck, big pharmaceutical company Merck, are now saying that these vaccines don't work, they create harm, the virus mutates, even though it has, of course, a 99.7% survival rate, and that's with comorbidities. Do you think they're starting to back up when you see the lockdown, the studies showing lockdowns, the death rates are way more damaging than so-called COVID? When you see all this information about the fake PCR tests where they've created up to 97% false positives, do you think that now we see these countries and big pharmaceutical companies saying, uh-oh, there's too much evidence, too many people know, and we have to have a plausible liability plan? Do you think that they're backing down because of that, Dr. Shealy?
Oh, I think they're wimps, and I wouldn't trust them either.
Yeah, there's got to be a reason why there's some regression on this plan. We'll be right back, folks. Welcome back to the broadcast, everybody. Rich Scheben, broadcasting from Montana. I'm interviewing Dr. Norm Shealy. Dr. Shealy, I know part of my question was kind of interrupted at the end with the break. Did you have any comments on expanding your answer regarding what I said before the break?
Well, you know, again, to me, for the last now 10 months, nothing in the media has been accurate or truthful. And that, I mean, I get scores of emails every day that are absolute opposite one another. And when it comes from the leftistas, I don't believe a word of it. And in my opinion, the Republicans, especially those in Congress, have been without testosterone. That's the kindest way I could put it.
Yeah, well, that's why they're called, a lot of them are called rhinos and neocons, right?
Right.
And if you want a real accurate opinion of this virus, there's a post. It's been going viral all over the place. It might have started on beforeitsnews.com, but basically it has all these frontline doctors and physicians talking about the dangers of the vaccine and how this COVID-19 should not be a pandemic, especially a deadly pandemic. And I got it off of AnnaVonRights.com. It's an hour video. I recommend you and your family listen to it. It's very informative. And that being said, I actually sent it to you, Dr. Shealy, either this morning or last night. I think I sent it last night. I'm sure you probably didn't have time to take a look at that. But let me ask you something. I'm also reading, Dr. Shealy, that the powers that be try to confuse people between in vitro and in vivo testing and vaccines. Can you tell people what that means, and have you seen this kind of discrepancy in order to fool the public?
Well, in vitro essentially means in a test tube, and in vivo means in a live person. That's the simplest way to put it.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that they could actually be coming out with different data that's in vivo versus in vitro? I mean, if you're doing a test tube, could they literally skew the results, Dr. Shealy?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they are different outcomes. They are different technology, different everything.
It's just like propaganda and PR.
Exactly.
I mean, when you look at the money that goes into PR and ads and sales versus the money that goes into R&D really isn't even close. Isn't that correct, Dr. Shealy?
Absolutely.
Well, since we're you took us into this deviation, Dr. Shealy, I'm going to mention more articles, and I would love your comments. Next article: Wisconsin Senate overturns statewide mask mandate as Dr. Fauci doubles down on more masks. Now, we've talked about this before, Dr. Shealy, regarding the lack of efficacy and the creation of more hypoxia, bacterial pneumonia, and dentists are coming out now saying that they're seeing way more gum disease because the bacteria in the mouth is far more dangerous than any other bacteria in the body, and that's associated with heart attacks and strokes. Your comments, Dr. Shealy?
All true. That part is true.
So how can, is the American public really this dumbed down? Despite everything that's true, that they feel the necessity. Even Dr. Rand Paul in the Senate is saying we got to stop wearing masks.
97.3% of Americans are too stupid to be alive. Now, I say that because 97.3% of Americans are missing 1 to 5 of the absolutely essential health habits. Only 2.7% of Americans have the 5 basic health habits. That means the others are too stupid to be alive.
And what are some of those basic health habits, Dr. Shealy?
Well, at the top of the list is a normal body mass index of 18 to 24. 72% of Americans are fat. That is, overweight.
Mm-hmm.
No smoking. 22% of adults still smoke. Eating a minimum of 5 and up to 8 or 10 servings of fruits and vegetables a day. The average American gets 2.2. Exercising 30 minutes 5 days a week. 10% of Americans get that. 90% do not. Sleeping 7 or 8 hours every night. Well over 45% of Americans don't sleep adequately. So you put it all together, 97.3% are missing 1 to 5 of those absolutely essential, common sense health habits. That means to me they're too stupid to be alive.
When you look at all this evidence, like this next article here, the UK government admits that COVID vaccines are pointless and offer zero protection. not to mention the fact that they have resuscitation facilities at these vaccine centers, which should be a red flag. Never mind that it's admitted that it's an experimental vaccine that changes your DNA forever. Never mind that it reprograms your cells. Never mind that it compromises your immune system, and it's an admitted bioweapon. So with all this, they still come out and say it's safe and effective, which is about as oxymoron as you can possibly get. So how can, if people are that dumb with all this evidence, with a so-called virus that has a 99.7% recovery rate, it's amazing to me, Dr. Shealy, how there can be any confusion about this at all.
Well, again, if you're confused about whether or not you should sleep or exercise or eat properly and all that kind of thing, how can you understand something this obtuse?
Now, do you think that the term cognitive dissonance is appropriate? I mean, when you look at humanity devolving into stupid, and it's pretty clear it's not really about the virus; it's more about control. And I think there's a saying out there somewhere, and I'm sure I'm going to paraphrase it, but a lie, when it reaches its full potential, or has reached its full potential, when asking questions and telling the truth about it becomes illegal. This is...
That is the joke of the year.
Yeah, I mean, common sense, logic, true value doesn't trump ignorance, corruption, manipulation, manufactured illusions, apathy. It's, wow. Sometimes it's hard to even address some of these behaviors and choices and lack of logic when there's so much evidence to show otherwise. Now, Dr. Shealy, here's another article. CNA nursing home whistleblower says seniors are dying, and I'm reading this. I'm not making this up, okay? I have to do my disclaimer, Dr. Shealy. When I mention articles, they're all published articles in the public domain. Some of them sound so treacherous, so treasonous, so seditious, so ridiculous that I have to say this disclaimer because some people may think I'm making this stuff up. Anyway, this nursing home whistleblower says seniors are dying like flies after the COVID injections. And she's telling everybody to speak out. Your comment, Dr. Shealy.
Well, I've seen that several times, and I agree. The more fragile you are, the more sensitive you are to poison. This is poison. I've said since the beginning, they will have to shoot me with a gun in order to get the vaccine into my body. That's how much I will resist it.
And here's a congressman who got the COVID shot twice and ends up with COVID. Now, from a medical standpoint, Dr. Shealy, how does that mean he had a low immune system to start with, or how did, because they're really trying to suppress this information. How does something like that happen?
What it means is the stupid vaccine is no damn good. That's as explicit as I can make it.
Okay, these next two articles, again, are published articles in the public domain, but it's kind of the comedy relief of this segment. The first article is, a miracle! Only 23 Americans tested positive for flu last week compared to 14,000 plus cases reported last year at the same time. And the next article is, flu was almost wiped out, Dr. Shealy, at the lowest level in 130 years as seasonal virus plummets 95%. And we all know anybody who has any brain cells or common sense knows that COVID is wrapped up in a new acronym, PIC, pneumonia, influenza, and COVID, not to mention motorcycle accidents, gunshot wounds. So obviously a lot of these so-called disease states are lessening by 95% because they're all throwing it in the COVID category. Your comments, Dr. Shealy.
Rich, the entire thing is so fake, so false, so seriously evil. That's the kindest thing I could say about the fake-ademic. It is evil personified.
Yeah, I'm going to mention a few more articles here, and then I'm going to go on to regular general questions, Dr. Shealy. Newsom, who's the governor of California, is hiding coronavirus data from the public while enforcing strict lockdowns. So he's just telling people how to behave and he's taking away your freedoms, your liberty, your justice, but he's not telling you why. Next article, young nurse died within 48 hours of receiving the Pfizer vaccine. Oh, and the Canadian government, here's the next article, is detaining citizens from returning home from international travel at undisclosed secret quarantine facilities. Does that sound like Nazi Germany or USSR? And U.S. universities, Dr. Shealy, I'm not making this up, these are all coming from articles right in front of me, are threatening to cut off students' internet access if they fail to comply with COVID restrictions. This is really scary stuff, and I don't know if you heard, the Cuomo regime undercounted the coronavirus nursing home deaths by 50%. If you or I did this, you'd be in jail for the rest of your life. And the next article is vitamin D, Dr. Shealy, could have prevented 90% of coronavirus deaths. What's your comment on that?
Well, I think 90% could be prevented by taking adequate vitamin D3 and vitamin C. It's that simple.
Okay. And last article I have on COVID is that they're talking it's major damage to a man's testicles and a female's placenta. It's pretty obvious that infertility is one of their main objectives, Dr. Shealy.
It's the whole thing. I have to laugh and detach. It's the best I could do with the entire nonsense.
Yeah, I hear you, Dr. Shealy, and it's so hard. That's why mentioning these articles is so important, because it is half comical, but it is half criminal. We'll be right back with Dr. Shealy after the break, folks. Welcome back to the broadcast, everyone. Last segment of the first hour. I'm with Dr. Norm Shealy. Dr. Shealy, just a little since we were talking about how some of this news is actually comical as well as being criminal, which is a very unusual combination, but it seems to be the norm these days. I was reading an article, since we were talking about the vaccine destroying the female's placenta and the male's testicles. There's almost a little bit of irony there, because the U.S. government now says men can get pregnant. Your comments, Dr. Shealy?
Well, the U.S. government says you can pretend you're a woman even if you're not. So that tells you what I think about the United States government in one simple sentence.
It's a real shame that the PSYOP done by the powers that be have taken advantage of humanity the way it has. Don't you agree, Dr. Shealy?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, to me, it's absolute insanity to let a man walk around in a woman's clothes and pretend to be a woman in a woman's bathroom and that kind of nonsense. That is, well, crazy. But then most things the government does is crazy.
Yeah, it's amazing how they think they can fix between what's in between the ears by cutting off what's in between the legs.
Well, and then you have to cut it off to walk around in women's clothes.
Yeah.
I mean, that's even more, well, the whole thing's crazy.
Yeah, I agree. Well, Dr. Shealy, let me start picking your brain a little further, if you don't mind. You talked about obesity and how important it is to stay fit and not be overweight, and 70% of Americans are obese or fat, which I don't know what the difference is by definition, but regarding I'm sorry, go ahead.
Overweight is a body mass index between 25 and 29. Frankly, obese, which is truly fat as stink, is a body mass index of 30 or above. That requires 40 pounds or more above your ideal weight.
Okay, so besides exercise, besides getting a decent amount of sleep, regarding obesity, is there other behaviors with certain types of foods that people should consume, and should they take more nutrients via fluids in order to become less obese and more healthy? What do you recommend overall regarding that statement, Dr. Shealy?
Well, overall, avoid excess, and that's almost any carbohydrates. If a food is primarily carbohydrates, don't eat it. And that means wheat, sugar, Irish potatoes, and white rice. They are all junk food. All boxed cereal is junk food. That's the top of the list.
Okay. Now, do you, because you've been a physician for so long, do you feel that the HIPAA regulations are more to protect the establishment than the anonymity and privacy of the people, Dr. Shealy?
Well, our number one responsibility is to do no harm. And so, any way you look at that, we have to make a decision, for instance, in everything that we do. Is what we're doing safer than not doing it? And does the thing we're doing have more negative effects than positive effects? Those two things are really quite important. Now, at the top of my list is the article in July, JAMA 2000, which stated the number 3 cause of death in the United States is the medical profession, period, in the report.
Well, that tells me there's going to be a lot less people going into hospitals, getting MRIs, getting CAT scans, getting X-rays. I mean, I feel that some people are so hypochondriac, paranoid-oriented, that some of these people get all these tests done on a sometimes several times a year basis. I mean, if you took these tests, don't we all have cancer cells in our body? I mean, aren't we all imperfect? If you took enough tests, you're going to eventually find something wrong with you, correct?
Well, of course. And according to oncologists, normal human beings, healthy human beings, produce cancer cells every day, but if their immune system is optimal, they destroy the cancer cells so they don't get rooted, so to speak.
Right. And regarding a cancer diagnosis, Dr. Shealy, what people, and you can answer this after the break, what percentage of people should get chemo/radiation, and which diagnosis of cancer should and should not? We'll be right back with Dr. Norm Shealy after the top of the hour break, folks. We appreciate you being here. Welcome back to USAPrepares.com, everyone. This is Rich Scheben broadcasting from Montana. I'm with Dr. Norm Shealy, and this is hour number 2, last hour of the broadcast. Dr. Shealy, do you recall the question regarding the cancer diagnosis right before the break? I don't know if the music...
Oh, yes, of course. There is no circumstance under which I would allow in my own body chemotherapy or radiation for any cancer whatsoever. From the beginning of chemotherapy, I have stated, I don't mind dying. I don't want to be poisoned to death.
Okay, well, that makes it very clear. I mean, there's no subtext or or other questions I can really ask about that, which I was prepared to do, but it seems like you're very adamant about that choice. And so how come, Dr. Shealy, so many people decide to get chemo and radiation? Is it because they're ill-informed? Has their doctor sold out?
They're not actually told that the actual life extension proof is a few months, average. In other words, some people die sooner, very few live a lot longer. And there are occasional exceptions, of course. But average, it's a waste of time, energy, and money.
You know, I know people personally who have lived 15, 20 years with cancer, and they basically just changed their diet, somewhat. They started eating organic foods. They laid off alcohol, laid off sugar, things of that nature. I think just a little bit of common sense that we can't be rowdy all of our years in our life, And speaking of food, Dr. Shealy, regarding culture, traditional culture, I'll use the Mediterranean diet as one example. Are there any other diets, and including the Mediterranean diet, which, in your opinion, is probably the best for overall health?
Well, there's no question the Mediterranean diet is one of the best. Now, one of the emphases, in my opinion, in the Mediterranean diet is that the animal protein they prefer is fish. There's no question that overall fish is a better quality protein. But that doesn't mean all animal protein is not good. It just means fish is the top of the list. And, of course, they emphasize lots of herbs and lots of vegetables.
Right. Now, regarding overall health, regarding obesity, regarding your immune system, do you feel that it's necessary for people to drink more water? And I see a lot of, and there's a little sub-question in there, too, because so many, especially today's kids, are drinking sugary or artificially sweetened drinks, probably by the majority. And I'm just wondering what your opinion is, Dr. Shealy, regarding hydration overall.
Well, it's low.
Overall.
One should drink, if you weigh 150 pounds, you should drink half that much in ounces of water, that is 75 ounces. But if it's city water, you're drinking poison. In most cities, if it's fluoridated. So, it doesn't pay to drink an adequate amount of city water. It must not be fluoridated.
I totally agree with that. Now, speaking of food, since we were kind of going back and forth on that, tell me, in your opinion, Dr. Shealy, the benefits of fermented foods like a sauerkraut, and what are some other examples, and what are those specific benefits, Dr. Shealy?
Well, the fermented foods are all, to my knowledge, excellent. Sauerkraut is one of those, but you can ferment all kinds of things, from basil to lettuce and spinach and cabbage of all kinds, etc., and broccoli, and on it goes. And, of course, there's fermented milk, if you will, and fermented other things like kefir and kombucha. All of these have extra probiotics that are good for you.
Now, someone just turned me on to kefir just a few months ago in a health food store. It's basically like drinking yogurt is what it really boils down to.
Exactly. And I make my own. Once you've got a culture, if you take care of it, you can keep, when it gets down to about 2 cups left in a half a gallon jar, start it over again with fresh milk.
Now, is there a way that you could accurately and quickly give a recipe for that on the air, Dr. Shealy, or do you have to look it up?
If you buy plain yogurt, a plain kefir at a health food store, and it usually comes in a quart size. So if it's a quart size, my first batch, I'll pour a whole quart into a half gallon jar, and fill the rest with plain whole milk, or I use dry powder milk and water, and let it sit at preferably about 75-degree temperature for 24 hours, and you've got a whole now 2 quarts of fresh kefir. Put it in the fridge, and if you drink a glass a day, when it gets down to about a pint left in the jar, start over again. That's the way I keep it going.
Now, Dr. Shealy, do you feel that there's a benefit, especially the people who might not have certain discipline, if they want to get healthier, they want to lose some body fat? What's your opinion, in your professional opinion and experience, regarding fasting?
I'm not a big faster. 12 hours is a fast for me. I don't like going for days. My body has never, since I was quite young, like that. If you are truly fat, maybe you can fast for a week at a time, but be sure to drink plenty of real water. I think it's better to cut out all carbohydrates, essentially. You don't need carbohydrates. You can make all the glucose you need out of fat or protein. So concentrate on quality protein. And my favorite, if you're not allergic to milk, the best, in my opinion, is whey protein powder. And the best in the plant family is actually hemp powder. It's a very high quality protein. It's much better than any other vegetable powder. Those are the places to get your protein other than fish and a modest amount of regular meat.
You mentioned hemp. I was going to, believe it or not, I have my next question right in front of me here, and that was your opinion on cannabis products. Like it could be CBD oil, it could be anything in that family. What's your overall opinion?
I don't like medical marijuana personally. To me, marijuana, regular THC marijuana is damaging to the brain long term. I believe you should produce your own anandamide. That's the normal cannabinoid made in the brain itself, and I'm working on that and have for years. But as far as the THC-free cannabinoid oil, I consider it good.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. Now, the next question is, I am not an endocrinologist. I'm not a physician. I'm not a diagnostician. But I'm reading a lot more about dangers of and overall situations of what they're calling fatty liver. Can you explain to people what that means, the symptoms, and how dangerous that could be, or if this is overrated, Dr. Shealy?
Well, no, fatty liver is the result of bad habits overall. It could be from smoking, it could be from alcohol, it could be from inadequate intakes of essential nutrients, even like chromium and vanadium, which are absolutely essential for your pancreas, etc. It means that you have eaten too much junk food. Now, what is junk food? Well, it's artificially changed anything. It is 90% of anything fat, if not greater, at a fast food restaurant. It is all the food on the center aisles in the grocery stores, except maybe fruit juices that have not had sugar added to them. I don't buy anything off the center aisles except bleach and stuff like that.
Right. Now, you mentioned the pancreas. I'm also reading a lot more diagnosis of pancreatitis and pancreas cancer. What are some symptoms, early symptoms of these things that are happening, and how can people avoid getting pancreatitis or pancreatic cancer, which is probably one of the most deadly forms of cancer, Dr. Shealy?
Well, it is that. And I can't tell you unequivocally, but I know that you must have adequate chromium in order to have your pancreas function adequately, and a little bit of vanadium at least. And if you eat a lot of carbohydrates, you're going to damage your pancreas. The pancreas can only handle so much. So the higher the percentage of carbohydrate in your diet, the greater the risk to your liver and your pancreas. Now, what is a lot? Well, to me, I would not like to take in more than maybe 150 grams, if that, of any kind of carbohydrate a day.
So what would be some symptoms, Dr. Shealy, of early pancreatis or pancreas cancer symptoms? What should people be looking for? Certain pains in certain parts of the body? Like I know pain can also be transient, but I hear people sometimes complain about pain right in the middle of their gut, underneath their sternum. Some people complain about pain underneath their left rib. Some people complain about pain underneath their right rib. I've also heard that or read that pancreatic cancer, if your stool is on the yellow side, that could be a pre-symptom to pancreatic cancer. What are some of those symptoms and warning signs, Dr. Shealy?
Well, I would say gaseousness, belching, and other things like that, indigestion symptoms, GERD, all of those are evidence that the digestive system is not working well. Now, then it can go into constipation versus diarrhea. It's things are not right in the digestive system. That it can go on for months and months before it becomes more serious, or it can happen very rapidly sometimes.
Is there any besides alcohol consumption, besides carbohydrate consumption, what else can people do to make sure those reoccurring symptoms don't happen? And maybe is it possible to avoid pancreatitis or pancreas cancer if you change your lifestyle?
Well, I think it probably is. I mean, most, even though it is a reasonably common kind of cancer, it's not the most common cancer in anybody or any group of people. I think the most important thing is to eat a balanced diet with lots and lots of veggies, small amounts of fruits, and very low carbohydrate.
Okay, we'll be right back with Dr. Shealy after the break. Welcome back, everybody. This is Rich Scheben sitting in for Vincent Finelli, and I am with Dr. Norm Shealy. Dr. Shealy, I try to give as much variety of questions for me and you, and especially our listeners, so they can get as much information as possible. Now, you mentioned GERD a moment ago. Regarding home remedies for heartburn, something that's not synthetic pharmacological drugs, what do you recommend in that behavior realm to change heartburn for the positive?
Apple cider vinegar, limonene, Limonene, and peppermint. Those three are by far the best.
And for apple cider vinegar, how much of a dose and how often should they take it, and when part of the day?
Well, a tablespoon first thing in the morning and a tablespoon maybe near the evening is probably adequate for apple cider vinegar. The limonene, up to 2,000 milligrams once or twice a day. And the peppermint gel, I like the little capsules. I don't know how many milligrams they are, but they come in tiny little capsules, 2 a day.
So how let's say you're taking apple cider vinegar. I think a lot of people are very familiar with that, and you took it BID like you suggest, a tablespoon at a time. How would you take it when your symptoms are getting worse, or do you take it every day for the rest of your life after you're initially diagnosed with GERD or heartburn?
It's probably wise to continue taking it indefinitely, yes. Can't hurt you.
Does it have other other benefits that are, for your health?
It does help your immune system, so I think that's its greatest side benefit.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. I'm also reading a lot about, and we've talked about this, about the microwave oven effect, living near cell sites, having all this electromagnetic radiation from your cell phone to your Wi-Fi to 4 and 5G, especially 5G, and all the levels of radiation that people are exposed to. Is there anything besides leaving urban, suburban America? Is there anything else that people can do to try to make their life a little more healthy regarding these electromagnetic tools, radiation tools?
To be quite honest, you couldn't pay me to live in a city of any size. Now, I have to work in a city. That's as long as I want to be in a city, 7 or 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. But otherwise, you couldn't pay me any amount of money to live in a city. Now, if I could, I might wrap my house in a total copper sheets around the entire house except for the windows, and ground it all to the ground. That would help, but it'd be pretty expensive.
Yeah, it would. Be a lot cheaper moving to the country, I guess.
Exactly.
Regarding, so many of us drink coffee, and let's face it, the main purpose is that it's a legal stimulant. And I want to ask you, do you drink coffee, and what do you recommend to other people to get similar benefits, Dr. Shealy?
Well, 1 to 2 cups a day seems to me to be actually good for the average person and non-harmful. And when it gets to 4 or more, that begins to be, I think, a stimulus for heart disease and pancreas problems. But if you don't get what you need out of 2 cups of regular coffee, now, I also like something called Gano, G-A-N-O coffee. It actually has reishi mushroom in it. Gives you some immune boost as well. But the others are NADH, acetyl L-carnitine, and, NAC, N-acetyl carnitine, acetyl L-carnitine, and NADH. Those are natural and seem to be safe stimulants.
Well, Dr. Shealy, we will be back after the bottom of the hour break. We certainly appreciate your expertise, and I have some more questions to ask you when we get back. We appreciate everybody being here, and we'll see you on the other side. Welcome back, everybody. Rich Scheben sitting in for Vincent Finelli, and I am interviewing Dr. Norm Shealy. Dr. Shealy, we talked about the pancreas, we talked about the gut, we talked about liver a little bit today, and I want you to talk specifically about symptoms. And I know this is kind of a broad question, but I want to talk about when people see a lot of people get pain in their torso. And it could be transient, but sometimes it's on the left side under the ribs, it's on the right side under the ribs, it's in the middle. Like, for example, sometimes when people get pain in the middle under their sternum, it's usually a gallbladder. Can you start with the left side of the torso in the gut area and explain what those symptoms mean? Not to necessarily say this is an absolute diagnosis, but what they should be concerned about. If it's left under the ribs, then we're going to start with right pain under the ribs, and then in the middle of the torso gut area. Can you start with the left under the ribs first, Dr. Shealy?
Well, that could be the spleen, although that's not terribly common. But the pancreas could be also left under the, left ribs. So or it could be the colon, or even, of course, the small intestine. So, I mean, there is an overlap. All of these things are irritations of certain things. So anything physically in that area, so it could be spleen, pancreas, small intestine, or colon on the left side. On the right side, it's going to be primarily right colon, liver or gallbladder, or, again, could be possibly small intestine. And in the middle, now you got to talk about the stomach. Even a peptic ulcer, of course, can do it, or pancreas. And again, even the colon, it goes across there, and the small intestine. So you've got all these organs that exist in all parts of the abdomen.
Okay. Would you say that, when you have a patient that comes to you and they say, I have pain in my gut or my torso, is one of your first follow-up questions to say exactly where it is?
Oh, yeah. And then, of course, I want to feel it. Press on it and find out whether it's tender.
Right. Okay. Regarding things like, let's say, because you're a general practitioner, you're a family doctor, so you've seen probably, I hate to use the term everything, but in all the years of practice, I bet it's pretty darn close to everything. So regarding dermatology, regarding melanoma, regarding things of that nature, do you feel, or sometimes I hear a lot of people who are paranoid about suspicious moles. Oh, I got to get it cut off. Oh, I got to get it biopsied. Oh, it could be cancer. I mean, what percentage of people who have suspicious moles, what percentage of them are actually malignant tumors, Dr. Shealy?
Well, I can't answer that because moles occur in all kinds of sizes, shapes, and colors even. If it's black and it was brown and it turns black, that is a worry about a melanoma. Other than that, moles can be pretty benign, and warts as well. And I actually, unless they look black already, I often treat them with a small, even Band-Aid and castor oil over it. Castor oil can help a benign mole go away.
Mm-hmm. Now, regarding, we've talked significantly, which we typically do, Dr. Shealy, about vaccines. You know, when you say, you heard me mention the article about the UK government admitting that vaccines are pointless and offer zero protection. You've heard me mention certain countries like Australia and France backing away from this regimen. Even Merck says that these vaccines do not work for several reasons, and of course because of the mutations. But in your particular years of experience, Dr. Shealy, when you see pharmaceutical companies and countries backing off of certain therapies, do you think has it been mostly because of litigious reasons, plausible deniability? I mean, why do you think that it looks like the trend is to back off from these vaccines, Dr. Shealy?
Well, I hope it's common sense and science, but I can't tell you. I don't know whether there's lawsuits involved. But for instance, it has been unequivocally reported in several countries already that death, even in the first few weeks of giving the vaccine, is increased. And that should be enough in itself to have a country back off.
You know, I think there's so much information coming out, like that Steve Hilton. He basically said that Dr. Fauci's Institute commissioned research that produced this COVID-19 virus, even after the Obama administration banned the funding of the controversial research. So do you think that some people, like the Faucis, like the Gates, like, you know, all these people who are involved so deep they have to keep the game, the hoax, whatever word you want to use, going? I mean, do you ever, in your experience of 60 years of practice, have you ever seen this kind of behavior, Dr. Shealy?
No, but the evil empire has been at it since the 1700s. The evil empire is the Committee of 300. And the Committee of 300 was started under the King of England back in the 1700s with the goal of owning and controlling the world. And the evidence for that is absolutely overwhelming. And their goal today is to reduce the population of the world by 90%, with about 98% of those 90% being slaves to the other 2% running the world. That's the actual goal. If you want to find out more about it, read The Committee of 300 by John Coleman.
Yeah, that's pretty scary stuff, and that goes back to what we were talking about earlier regarding ignorance, apathy, indifference, and a lot of other terms and adjectives. You know, when people see these behaviors and they can't connect the dots and they don't even see studies, you know, double-blind clinical studies that show the efficacy of these products, never mind masks, and actually doing more harm than good, I just don't understand why people, unless it's a total plan for eliminating the individual and creating suppression, creating conformity, submissiveness, despair, and division and elimination of rights. It looks kind of like that's where the powers that be are going. Wouldn't you agree, Dr. Shealy? Oh, absolutely. No question about it. And so, unless something happens in the next 4 years, we're there. It will not be reversible if it isn't changed within the next 4 years. Wow. Well, that's pretty doggone scary, Dr. Shealy. I know a lot of people. We talked about anxiety and depression, and the units of measure of despair earlier in the show, and it's not good. And I'm just wondering, I know a lot of people who have children, who have grandchildren, and they see, they read, they experience, they observe what's going on today, and anxiety, suicide, obesity. Overdose of drugs. It's really insane, and I think a lot of people don't know what to do and how to prepare for this. And that's why I've been asking about questions like superfoods, like supplements. If you have a certain budget and you wanted to really, and it was very limited, and you were just a little guy that couldn't do commerce anymore, what superfood or supplement for a low-income person would you recommend people really concentrating on with diligence, Dr. Shealy?
Whey, W-H-E-Y, protein concentrate or isolate.
Okay, could you go into more detail?
Well, it's an extract from milk, so unless you're allergic to milk, it is one of the greatest proteins on the face of the earth. And you can get you have to have a protein out of that. Now, I do like, as I said, also the hemp protein. Those are the two best. And it's a lot cheaper to buy it as a dried powder than it is to take it out of whole milk, for instance. But basically, although I do personally like to add sardines and salmon and fish of all kinds and a little bit of beef and liver, calf liver, all of those things. But the least expensive and the best quality is whey.
Okay. Now, regarding things like edible and medicinal plants and mushrooms in general, Dr. Shealy, what's your recommendation and feeling and knowledge about those topics?
Well, I love mushrooms. My favorite, I suppose, is reishi, but there's lion's mane and tiger tail, and there are a lot, cordyceps and bacoma. All of these are good. They are good for the immune system.
Okay. Now, Dr. Shealy, pardon me bouncing back and forth with all these different topics of symptomology and disease states and organs and things, but I just think it's good variety for the listeners. Regarding, I know this might be a litigious question, but you're seeing a lot of evidence, as I discussed with Austria and France and Merck saying what they're saying, and a lot of countries backing off. Japan, they want clinical studies now before they start jabbing their people. They don't want just animal studies. They don't want fast-track vaccines. They really want to start looking into this. Now, could it be a setup to create some type of false efficacy so they can jab their people? Who knows? You never know these days. But when you see so much evidence of vaccines, especially the COVID vaccines, which we've discussed today and on many shows in the past, having irreversible genetic damage, which is basically a crime against humanity, which is a crime against the Geneva Convention, the Nuremberg Code, the Hippocratic Oath. If this information continues to come out, are we going to see physicians take the brunt by the powers that be and start losing medical license who did not refuse these COVID vaccines with all this new information coming out, Dr. Shealy?
I think it's highly likely that our stupid, ignorant, evil current government will have to begin to go that route sooner or later.
Wow. Living in interesting times, huh?
Well, that's a nice, kind way of putting it.
Yeah. Welcome back, everybody. Last segment of the broadcast. We certainly appreciate you being here. Dr. Shealy, I appreciate all your knowledge. It's unbelievable, the things that you know. And, practical experience always beats theory 100 to 1 every time. And Dr. Shealy, regarding things like in our foods, I've talked about this before, like pseudo-estrogens or estrogen mimickers, like soy products, tofu is up to 90% estrogen. I've read that linseed oil and flax could have it, sesame seeds, wheat berries, wheat, barley, rye, oats, and they could trigger autoimmune responses to things like gluten, and which a lot of people are sensitive to. But first, to address the pseudo-estrogens or the estrogen mimickers in food and how dangerous that could be, and if there's any other culprits that you know of, Dr. Shealy.
Well, of course, I don't like wheat for many reasons, mainly because it has triple the Roundup in it of any other food. Now, unfortunately, I think it is absolutely unethical and immoral to call something organic today because 75% of the range throughout the country has Roundup in it. So if it had Roundup dropped out of the rain, it ain't organic. So that is the biggest concern of all. Satan, to me, is part of the great evil empire. Now, other than that, obviously soy is probably the top of the list. I do not personally eat any regular soy food like tofu and things like that, just because I think it's worse than any other food. The most important thing is to get plenty of vegetables and a little bit at least of the better fruits. And the vegetables are huge. I mean, it's a list of 50 or more different kinds of foods. But the green leafies especially are all excellent. Now, for people who don't like to waste their time, money, and energy, you could buy something called ORAC, rich, RICH greens, a powder. One scoop of that is equal to 6 servings of vegetables. I mean, that's a cheap and inexpensive way to get your veggies and the antioxidants in them. Now, in addition, tart cherry juice, 2 tablespoons of tart cherry juice gives you the equivalent of 3.7 servings of fruits and vegetables. So those 2 supplements alone are far better than actually buying the vegetables and the fruits in the grocery store.
Dr. Shealy, I mentioned gluten and the autoimmune response it can trigger, and everybody talks about gluten. When I buy bread for my chickens, my goats, at a bread store that I get at a discount because it's past the expiration date, 90% of that bread or whatever that pastry is, if it's gluten-free, they won't eat it because of the process that it takes to take out the gluten, never mind the cause what gluten does originally.
That doesn't surprise me. Chickens is part of the people.
Yeah, like decaffeinated coffee. When anything gets more processed, you hear the term processed food all the time, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be good for you, does it, Dr. Shealy?
Absolutely not. More likely not.
Yeah, I mean, when you have chickens and goats refusing to eat it, that tells you something right there.
Absolutely.
Now, regarding you mentioned fruits and vegetables a lot. How do you categorize nuts, and
most nuts are excellent. Most nuts are truly excellent. Protein, especially, and some good fats.
And what dose or amount should a person eat? Should it be daily? And what nuts should they avoid?
Well, to me, cashews and pecans are the best and walnuts are the best of the nuts. But there are others, of course. I suppose my favorite, just because I grew up on them, is pecans. And a handful, whatever a snack is.
Okay. Is there any nuts that should be avoided for any reasons?
I don't think so. I mean, all the nuts have some value.
Okay. Now, Vince and I, we're going to talk a little bit tomorrow about silver, because he mentioned he wanted to discuss that in a different context, more of the value of it and, the benefits of solar panels and stuff. Regarding antifungal, anti-tumor properties in health, do you recommend silver to maybe put a coin in your water filter? What do you suggest, Dr. Shealy?
I have to say I don't take it. I'm not opposed to it. Colloidal silver is anti-infectious, if you will, but I don't personally add it.
Okay. Well, Dr. Shealy, as always, it's been an honor to interview you. Your knowledge is second to none. Thank you so much for what you do for the people, and you have a great week, sir.
And the same to you, Rich. Thanks. Have a good one.
Thank you.